In the stillness of morning a man sat slumped at the corner of a small village tavern, his eyes tired and red stared at nothing. His heart however was full of noise, deep. "Why won't you come back to me?" he whispered gripping the cup in his hand. "I miss you so much it hurts," he mumbled, his voice cracking through the silence. He staggered to his feet stumbling toward the shopkeeper. "Excuse me. Have you seen my Deep? She used to come here." The woman behind the counter sighed, shaking her head. "You're drunk again. She's not coming back. Not to a man who chooses alcohol over love." "Why? Why do you all judge me? I have money. I'll pay," he shouted, waving his hands. "You're a fool," the woman muttered. "And your Deep deserves better." The man slumped back into his seat holding the bottle close like a friend. "If only you come back, Deep. I swear I'll quit drinking. Just come home." From a distance an older woman approached, his mother. She looked at her son with a heavy heart. "What has become of you, my child?" she said softly. "You're no longer the man I raised." "Look at you, me," he cried. "Please. Find Deep. I don't want to live without her." "Enough," she snapped. "You drink all day and cry like a child. Do you think that will bring her back?" He fell to his knees. "Then please, go find her for me. I'll do anything. I'll change." The mother's eyes darkened with determination. "I will find her. I'll speak to Mr. Kien, the man who sold her to us for 2 buffalo. I'll make him help us. If he can't find her he'll owe us 2 buffalo back." Her voice grew firmer. "But I believe he will. I must believe he will." She turned to her son, now curled in on himself, muttering Deep's name. "Stop crying. Go inside. Sober up. If I bring her back don't you dare hurt her again." And with that she walked away, into the morning mist, chasing a shadow from the past. That same morning, while pain and regret weighed heavy on someone else's shoulders, Deep was already up, her hands gently brushing the dry earth. She stood alone in a vacant plot of land, eyes focused, heart steady. "I think I'll plant some vegetables here," she whispered to herself. A voice called out behind her, warm and familiar. "Miss Deep, you're up early today." She turned and saw James carrying a small bag of food. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. "I had work at a nearby farm," he replied. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." "That's kind of you," she said softly. "You've been working long?" he asked, looking at her tired hands. For a little while she nodded. "Sit down for a bit," he offered. "I brought you something to eat." "Thank you," Deep replied. "But why are you always helping me?" James smiled. "Because you deserve it. I'll go pick a pomelo from the orchard," he added. "Wait here, okay? Just pick a ripe one," she said with a small smile. James walked off, eyes scanning the trees. "I need the juiciest, ripest fruit. The kind my mom used to pick," he murmured. When he returned he held up a large golden pomelo. "This one's from one of our oldest trees, about 10 years old. What variety is it?" Deep asked, curious. "It's called sugar pomelo," James said. "My mom taught me how to peel it properly." He sat beside her, carefully slicing the fruit. "Let's see if I'm still as good as she was," he joked. "I have a question for you," Deep said hesitantly. "Ask away," he encouraged. "Why did you come back to Vietnam? Life abroad must have been so much better." James paused, then answered, "I think I just wanted to be close to nature. To something real." "You're the chairman of CI Company, right?" "Yes," he nodded. "My parents built it before I studied overseas. They focused on agriculture, ginger, corn, cassava, pomelos, and also had a wood business. When I finished my master's degree they handed everything over to me. They're still abroad, but I chose to stay here." "I see," Deep whispered, looking away. He looked at her gently. "But tell me, what about your family?" "My parents passed away early," she said quietly. "My uncle raised me, then. One day he sold me for 2 buffalo." James froze. "What, to a man who later became my husband?" "Since that day I've never gone back to my uncle's house." James clenched his jaw. That's unforgivable, Deep smiled faintly. It's the past now, you're stronger than most, James said softly. You're kind, she replied. Not many people would say that to someone like me. James handed her a slice of pomelo. Try it. Tell me if it tastes like hope. She bit into it, surprised by the sweetness. It's really good, she said. The first time I've tasted something like this. There's more, he smiled. Feel free to take as much as you like. Must be expensive, she said shyly. Maybe in Vietnam, James chuckled. But elsewhere it's just a few dollars. They sat in silence for a moment, sharing fruit and quiet company, and in that space between two strangers, a small thread of connection began to take root. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to mellow, Deep knelt back down in the field, her hands buried in dry soil. She was startled by a voice behind her. You've already done this much? James asked, walking back toward her. She looked up, surprised. Why are you here again? I made a mistake, he said, scratching his head. My appointment isn't today, it's tomorrow. You should rest, she said. You've already helped enough. No, James replied. It's been a while since I did any real physical work. Let me try. She hesitated. Are you sure you can handle it? James grinned. Trust me. I'll be fine. All right, then dig just like I did on this side. Like this? He asked, mimicking her movements. Almost, Deep said, chuckling. But the soil needs to be a bit fluffier. James wiped the sweat from his brow. This is harder than I thought. You're not used to using your hands, are you? Well, business gives me headaches. This gives me sore arms. You're not wrong, she smiled. But farming grows food. Headaches don't, he laughed. Fair point. What kind of vegetables will you plant? James asked, glancing around. Just mustard greens. Fast-growing, simple stuff. He nodded, continuing to dig. This soil's a bit hard, but I can manage. She watched him for a moment, then said gently, you're doing better than I expected. Good. So do I pass your farming standards yet? He joked. Almost, she teased. Try not to hit so many rocks next time. James looked up, sweat dripping from his chin. I think I'm starting to regret this, he joked. But you're still smiling, Deep said quietly. He looked at her and nodded. Because I'm helping someone who matters. They stood together under the late afternoon sun, surrounded by nothing but dry earth, simple dreams, and a warmth that didn't come from the sky. Sometimes it takes digging deep to realize someone's already digging into your heart. That evening, as the chill of early winter swept over the countryside, Deep sat quietly in her new home, the fire flickering low in the corner. The silence was peaceful, but lonely. Suddenly a knock at the door. Miss Deep, it's me. James, a familiar voice called out. She opened the door, surprised. What brings you here at this hour? I passed through the market and saw some fresh pork. I thought. Maybe you haven't eaten yet. You guessed right, she smiled faintly. I was too shy to go out in the dark. Well then, he said, placing a bag on the table, let me prepare something simple. He set up a small grill, brushing aside the firewood. Let's use charcoal. It cooks better. Need help? She asked. No, you sit and relax, James replied. She watched as he gently arranged the meat. You've grilled before? She asked. A few times, he said. When I used to live alone abroad. I didn't have anyone to cook for me, so I had to learn. He glanced up. Have you ever had grilled pork like this? Never, she replied. This is a first for me, he smiled. It shrinks when cooked, so don't worry. It's not too much. As the meat sizzled, the aroma filled the space between them. It smells amazing, she whispered. Wait until you taste it, he grinned. They sat near the fire, faces warm from the heat. Today, after I finished digging, I went to get some cassava to sell, Deep shared. Someone overpaid and refused to take the change. James paused, then said, there are still good people out there. I should have brought you more rice and vegetables, he added softly. I can take care of myself, Deep replied gently. You don't have to do so much, I know, James said. But I want to. Earlier I was startled when you showed up, she admitted. That's my fault. I should have called out first. James leaned back looking into the fire. How was your day? Busy, he said. I visited the workers harvesting pomelos. It was harder than I expected, but the view was beautiful, he added. Mountains, fields. Quiet. Do you ever feel scared staying here alone? He asked. Not until you mentioned it, she said with a smirk. Now I'm scared, he chuckled. Sorry. But don't worry, there's nothing to fear. The meat was finally ready. He handed her a piece. Here, try this. She took a bite, eyes lighting up. This is amazing, she said. I prepared it earlier, marinated with spices, he explained. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. Promise me one thing, James said. What is it? She asked. Don't cry tonight. No more tears, okay? She nodded slowly. Okay. No more crying, and in that moment the fire wasn't the only thing keeping her warm. As the last pieces of grilled pork disappeared, a comfortable silence settled between them. James looked at Deep, his voice softer now. I can't promise the world, but I promise to protect you no matter what, he said. Deep paused, her eyes meeting his. Why are you so kind to me? She asked gently. James smiled, a little shy. Maybe because you remind me what it means to care. It's late. You should go home now, Deep said, lowering her gaze. You're right, James nodded, reaching for his phone. Good night, Miss Deep, good night. And thank you, she replied quietly. As he stepped out into the night, the air turned colder, but in Deep's heart a quiet warmth remained, the warmth of being seen and not judged.
Xin chào mọi người. Tập này nói về vấn đề mà nhân vật chồng của Diệp, chồng của Diệp rất hối hận và mẹ chồng muốn đến ăn vạ uống Diệp, tại vì phong tục cưới ở vùng Diệp ấy là cưới vợ thì phải mất một cái sính lễ. Cái sính lễ này là 2 con trâu, thì mẹ chồng muốn dùng cái sính lễ này để uy hiếp bố của Diệp. Chính vì vậy mà thì phần sau nữa sẽ có cái kết của việc này. Còn tập này vẫn xoay quanh vấn đề là Siro Jack đến giúp Diệp làm vườn, trồng cây, dọn dẹp nhà cửa và nấu ăn. Cảnh mà Siro Jack và Diệp ăn cơm và giáp cúng đường sống gia đình, thì cái tình tiết này, câu chuyện này nó sẽ như thế nào thì mọi người hãy like và subscribe kênh của mình để đón xem và tiếp theo nhé. Mình cảm ơn mọi người, hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở tiếp theo.